is this thing called Flask. What's Flask? Do you guys know yet?
Anyone? You put whiskey in it, you take it in.
Yeah, exactly. So what it is in terms of Python is that it's basically a micro framework, which will actually allow us to create a small little web server where we'll be able to set up some basic routes and do some simple things. So the first step to actually be able to use Flask is we're going to want to set up some kind of a virtual environment. All right? And I know you guys have come across this in the platform. I'm going to try to get to where my virtual environments are real quick. So if I go to Python, I've got an environments folder here. So if I go environments, got some different environments already, but I'm just going to go through the process of setting one up with you guys so that you see how we do it. So if I remove this Flask environment that I already have, is this big enough for you guys? Yeah, it's better, right? So if I remove with recursive force this Flask folder, that will allow me to create a new environment with that exact same name. So here's how we do it. We're going to say Python 3 -m and then venv and then the name of the environment that we want to create. Okay. Now if can someone grab that door too, please? So now if I ls inside this directory, you'll see I have this new folder called Flask, and that is my actual environment that I just created. Okay, so the way that I can activate that is like this. I'm going to say source, the name of the environment, and then I have to say /find and then /activate. The command in Windows is slightly different. Does anyone know what that is offhand? Okay. All right. And the instructions for that are in the platform too, but it is different than on a Mac. So now that it's activated, you can see this down here in parentheses. It's telling me that that Flask environment, virtual environment, is activated. All right. So what we want to do once we have this environment activated is we're going to want to install the things that we'll be using inside of it. So in our case, really the one thing that we're going to install is just going to be Flask right now. So the way that we install is we say pip install Flask. Okay, and then it's doing some different things here. You'll notice I have a little message there that there's a newer version of pip available. So I could run this command to actually upgrade my pip version. Okay, cool. So it installed pip 19.2.3, and then what we want to do is actually create a folder for a new project, because basically we're just going to kind of do a small little Flask demo just to see how the whole thing works. So if I go back to my I'm going to go back to the lectures directory here, and then we'll just create a directory. So I can say make dir, and we'll just call it hello Flask. Okay. Now I'm going to cd into hello Flask, and you can see we have nothing in there yet because we haven't actually created any files. Let's create a server file, which will actually be where we have our main code. All right. So I'm just going to say touch, server.py. Okay. And then I'm actually going to code this. So if I go code in that current directory, it will open up a new window for me. But once I open up the terminal here, is my virtual environment activated? It's not active here, right? So I would actually need to activate it again. Kind of a pain in the butt, but I'm just going to say source up a couple levels into my environments. Oops. And then again, Flask, find activate. Okay, so now it's activated and I can actually run my project directly from this window, which is what I want. I've got this server.py file. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're just going to set up our basic app that we can run with Flask. So the first thing that we need to do is actually import Flask so that I can use it in this file. All right, so we'll say from Flask import Flask. Now what does that look like? You see how we've got Flask capitalized here? What does that sound like? Why is it capitalized? It's what? Module. It's a class. Yeah, so we typically capitalize our class names. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an app using this particular class. Okay, so we're going to create a new instance of Flask. So let's do that. Let's say app equals Flask. And then we're going to use this thing called name. And actually, before we even do that, I'm just going to print out what name actually is. Okay, so let's say print dunder. Have you guys come across that before? A double underscore. See how we'd say dunder name. And then let's just run this file. Okay, so I'll just say python server.py. Okay, so when I printed that, notice what I got. Dunder main. And what that means is that I am actually running this file directly. I'm not actually importing it into some other file, running it from some other place. Okay? If I was running it from some other place, do you guys know what dunder name would return me? Say it again.
No.
Nothing.
Isn't it the variables that we have access to?
No, it would actually give me back the name of the file.
Oh, the name of the file.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we're going to do is when we create a new instance of the Flask class, we're going to pass it this name variable as well. And that's why I wanted to just show you guys what that thing was, so it wasn't like, wait a minute, what is that? Well, it's actually giving us a value. It's giving us the value double under main like that, right? So let me get rid of this. Okay, and then we create this app using Flask, and then the other thing, and I need to pass in the double under name, like I said, dunder name. And then down here, what we're going to do is we're going to check to see, are we running this file directly? So if name equals dunder main, that means that I'm actually running this file directly. And then I want to have my app run. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if double under name whoops, messed that up. Equals main. At that point, I actually want to run my app. Okay, so say app.run. And what's this right here? What does this look like in terms of object-oriented programming? So what do we call it when it's within the confines of object-oriented programming? A method, right? So we've created an instance of the class Flask, and now we're running a method off of that instance. Okay? So one thing we want to do when we're in development is we want to say debug. So this is an argument that we can pass in is true, and what that's going to do is it's going to give us some information about the different routes that we hit. Okay? We can also specify what port we want this to run on. So if I want it to run on 3000, I can put it in there. Okay. Now let's run this guy. So we'll do the same thing. Python server.py. Notice that it's starting up a server for me, and it tells me down here it's running on this port. So this is the same as localhost when you see 127.0.0.1, and then our port is 3000. So we can actually go there to check it out. So if I just do command click here, not found. Okay. So have we created any routes in our app just yet? No, nothing, right? So we would expect that we wouldn't have a working route at that specific location. What if I just put in a bad address on, I don't know, let's just say some bunk URL here.com. Notice that the page that we get in this case is not the same. So if we actually hit a bad address on the internet, we get a page that kind of looks like this, right? However, I'm getting what kind of error up here? Can you guys see what it said in the address bar? 404 not found, right? So it actually tells us we actually have an app running on this specific port, as opposed to just hitting a bad website on the internet. Okay. So let's talk about actually getting a route going for this app. Close that out. Come over here. I'm going to load it up over here actually. So localhost 3000. And the way that we can create a route is using something called a decorator. All right? You guys may have seen these so far, I'm not sure, but we could say app.route. And then the first argument here is just going to be what is the path that we want this route to be for. So if I do just a /, what do you guys think that will be? Anyone? It's just going to be the main index route. Yeah, so like when we go to localhost 3000, that / is the route that's actually going to be picked up. Okay. So what we need to do with a decorator is we need to give it some kind of function to handle what the decorator is saying. So the decorator is saying, I want to handle this specific route just at a /, and then the next line down is where we're actually going to put a function that can deal with that specific route. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll create some index method. And then inside that method, what I'm going to do is just return something. So let's just return hello from Flask. Okay. Notice how my server restarted there, which is quite nice. We don't have to keep stopping and restarting. Using that debug flag will do it for us. So it's going to happen every time you make a change to your code. Quite nice. So if I come back over here, now we're actually getting a message, right? We're actually printing something back in the return. So some other things that we want to do. Oops, one second. So we've shown how to run it and basically how to create a basic route. Decorators we talked about. We talked about how to return a string from the home route. Let's talk about just printing. So when we print something, if I put something in my code here, one second. So if I'm inside here and I print hello, where is this going to show up? Is it going to show up here in my terminal, or would it show up in the website itself? So if I open up let me open up my console real quick. So if I open up my developer tools here and I have my console open, will that message show up in here? Let's have a show of hands. How many think it'll show up here on the front end of the website? George, okay. Anyone else? Baxter? All right, so we got 2 hands there. And then how many of you guys think that it will show up here in my terminal? Did someone not vote? Kevin? What's your vote, man?
I'm trying to like figure out trying to figure it out. It's almost like
Well, just pick one. It doesn't have to be like it doesn't have to be the most informed vote. Just pick something. Left or right? Yeah. Terminal here in the back end of our application, or the console on the front end. Console on the front end. Okay. So those who said the console are incorrect. It's actually going to show up in the back end of our application. And we saw that earlier. Remember when I printed double under name? So yeah, anytime I print here inside my Python code, Python is a server run language. You'll see it down here in the terminal. Okay, so if I save that, refresh, notice how that print happened. Because every time my app is getting reloaded, it's rerunning that code that's in there. All right. I don't know why I put a semicolon in there. I guess I'm in some kind of a JavaScript frame of mind. Sorry about that. Okay, any questions about that? The difference between the console on the front end of a website and the terminal on the back end? Nope. Okay. Fair enough. Let's see what else we got to cover here. It's a bunch of stuff. All right, so we showed returning a string. Let's show returning a string with some HTML tags, and then we'll get into actually rendering a template. Okay, so I can also add some tags to this string. If I want to put that inside of an h1 tag, I can do that. Go back to the app, refresh it. You see we actually have our h1 now, so that's kind of nice. Would I want to write my app this way though? Long strings like this? No. That would be pretty tedious, right? Because I'd have to keep connecting different strings. I might have to interpolate by putting some different variables inside them. Boy, that would be a monster pain, right? Okay. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use something called templating, which allows us to create HTML template files, and it allows us to actually put some values inside those. So if I want them to be dynamic, in other words, have some specific data for any particular user at any given time, I can push those bits of information into my template. Okay, so let's talk about how to do that. First, what we're going to do is we'll actually create a folder for our templates called, surprisingly enough, templates. All right, and then inside the templates, that's where we can create some HTML files. All right, so let's do index.html, and then here we'll just create some boilerplate, and inside there we want to do something else. So let's say h1 hello from Flask template. And then over here, what I want to do is instead of just returning the string, I actually want to render a template. Flask gives us a function called render_template that we can use to tie in to the templates that we create inside the templates directory. Okay, so I can say return render template. Okay. And then we want to pass the actual name of the template. So in this case, it's going to be HTML. Now notice this. I'm actually getting some kind of a red squiggly line here. What's happening?
that means it's not working.
Well, it means potentially there's a problem. Let me show you one other. We have a red squiggly in another spot, but this one's not a problem. Notice here it's saying unable to import Flask. You guys have any idea why that's happening? I'll tell you in a second. Basically what's happening is that VS Code doesn't really realize that we're inside of a virtual environment right now and that we do have access to Flask, because my environment's not here in this same folder, so Flask is not there, and VS Code's like, wait a minute, I don't have access to Flask, so we can't get it. So in that case, it's not actually a problem because we're using this virtual environment. But in this case, when I try to use this function render template, did I write that function? Have we written this anywhere? Do I have like def render template higher in my code? No, I don't, right? So I actually need to either write that function or I need to import it from somewhere. Do I want to write that function? No. Yeah, big head shakes on that. So let's import it from Flask. Okay. So up here, we'll add this to our list of imports. We'll say we're also going to bring in render template. And now we should be good. So if we go down here, you see the red squiggly went away. Right? Okay. And if I refresh this page, now we're actually rendering from a template as opposed to just returning back a string. Okay? And so Flask is using underneath the hood this templating engine called Jinja. So if you guys want to see some of the things that Jinja is capable of, you could go to the Jinja 2 documentation. See what we would find right there. So we got welcome to Jinja 2, 2.10. Yeah, a lot of this stuff won't really mean anything to you guys as far as, oh, I don't necessarily need to know that, but I just wanted to show you Jinja 2 does have documentation, so if you had a question about something, you could check for it on there. We're also going to go over how to do basic for loop type stuff in here. Okay. All right. Next thing we want to cover is essentially how do we pass some information to the template. So here I'm just rendering it, but what else might I want to do when I render a template? Right now the template has no dynamic information. It's all just static, meaning that it was coded at one time and it just is what it is. But if I'm rendering a page for a specific user or something, what might I want to show that user? Anything?
Like the functionality of the template itself?
Well, we might want to show the user his name or something like that, or maybe his picture, right? Just something, some information that is specific to that particular user at that given point in time, right? So what we can do is we can pass additional arguments to the function and give them names that we're going to reference inside of our template. Okay? So let's say I had a user, and I'm just going to create a little user dictionary here. So we'll just say name is Bob Smith, because I like using that. Okay? And then when I invoke render template, what I want to do is I want to pass user, and I want to set that equal to the user dictionary that I just created. Okay? And that will allow my template to actually have access to this user that I'm passing along to it. So if I go here inside my index.html, I can also say, let's do something down here. We'll do inside of an h2 hello, and then I want to output his name. So the way that we do that in Flask or in Jinja 2 is we use these double mustache tags. Yeah, kind of funny, right? And I'm going to say the user, and the piece of the user that I'm interested in is his name. Okay? Any questions about this, what I'm doing here? So I'm accessing the name property of that user dictionary that I passed through to the template, right? Okay, and I saved that there, so we should be good. Let me go back to our page there. Okay, so now we've got hello Bob Smith. We're actually passing some information to our template. That's nice. What if I wanted to pass more than one user? What structure do you think I'd use for that?
Choose another depth.
Another what? Like
So do you mean for that same user, or did you set a second user?
Yeah, what if I wanted to pass in sort of like a list of users? So let's say that we're looking at a page and we just want to see sort of all the users in our app. What kind of data structure would I probably want to use for that? Yes, I heard list over there somewhere. That's exactly correct. So let's change this. Let's say we're going to pass in some a list of users. Open up a list here, and then I'm just going to move over the indentation a little bit. Okay, so user 1, his name was Bob Smith. User number 2, let's say this user's name was Anna. And your last name is J-U-N-G, is that right?
Y-U-N-G.
Oh, Y-U-N-G. Like that? Okay, cool. Alright, and then we'll close out our list. And then what I need to change here is instead of passing in a user, I'm going to pass in a little list of users, right? So we'll change the name of this. And notice how I'm always kind of careful about what I'm calling things. If I left it at user, wouldn't that be kind of confusing to me if I went back to my template and I said, oh, but I'm trying to loop through a user. No, I'm actually looping through a list of users. So it's very important to name these things something that makes sense to you so that you don't get stuck later on scratching your head like, you know, I thought I was looping through a list of users, but it's called user. Okay? So Jinja gives us this way of looping through data. And when we're going to do that, we actually need to use these percent signs. Okay? You guys remember how we would loop through a list? Let's say I don't need to access the index of each item in the list. How would I do that?
How does it look above?
Above in here or in server.py?
I guess it's in server.py.
Server.py? Yeah, so we just have this list here. Let me go like this. So we've got this list of users. So how could we loop through them in such a way that we have access to each user separately? Remember Python Olympics? I heard something over there. Go ahead. For what in users? So we could say something like for user in users, right? We're going to single out each individual user. Excellent. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a little table, and this isn't strictly necessary, but we'll just create a little table, and then inside that I'll have a T head and then a T row that has one header, and then I'm going to go up a couple levels. Have you guys seen any the Emmet shortcuts that you can do in VS Code? No, not yet. You'll learn to really appreciate them if you use them. Because I want to go up a couple levels, and then I want to create a T body, and then I want to create another T row, and then a TD. All right. Pretty sweet, right? Yeah, exactly. He didn't show you that in WebFun? No? All right. Yeah, so we can, if you guys ever have a question about that, we can talk about it a little bit, but autocomplete's pretty nice. So if I tab, it will actually take me to the next table data, right? But instead of just doing this like this, I want to create some kind of a loop here so that I can loop through my users, right? All right. So the way that we do that again is going to be with these percent signs. So I can say for user in users, and then close it off like that. And then after this, what I want to do is just end my for loop. So I can just say end for that. And then inside, how do you think I'm going to output the name? So according to what we were doing before, when I was just outputting Bob Smith, how am I going to output the name of each user inside that?
Would you do the same thing, but instead of for user and users, like it would be like for Anna Young and user?
Well, keep in mind that I'm already looping. So inside this loop, what does user mean? Yeah, exactly. It's referencing that specific item in the list. So how do I get that user's name?
Just
If
do
user
just call
name
it.
User equals?
equals
You sure?
wait for when
We don't want to actually
or just
reassign the user to anything because the user already is that item in the list, right? But how do we just output his name in
Return name.
here? Return name. Hey, it's not a function, all right?
I don't know, user like quotations name or
Okay, you're
User
close. What else did we need though when we were outputting Bob Smith's name?
Oh,
User dot name.
So we needed the mustache tags, right? And then the other thing is, so if I say user, and then how do I get his name again? Brackets, name, right? Okay, so we saved that. Let's try that here. And there we go. We're actually looping through that. So we could also add some other thing to it. I don't know, just to play around. Let's say the age of Bob Smith is 100. Actually, we can keep this as an integer. Anna, let's say your age is 25. All right. And now in my template, I want to get that as well. So I'll just add another th here. So we'll say age. Add another td down here. And then same thing, right? So we're just going to say user age bracket, and then we always have to close off those double mustache tags. All right, and then if I go and refresh, cool. So we've got the ages in there as well. So the important thing here is that when we're using the percent signs inside Jinja or Flask, because Flask is using Jinja, the percent signs mean that we're creating some kind of a control structure. Okay, so here this is creating our looping construct for us. And then when we just use double mustache tags, what does that mean? According to like what we're seeing here, like what are the double mustache tags doing for us?
selecting the items in
Selecting? Any other ideas? The selecting part is kind of happening inside here, right? So we're actually selecting the name attribute of that user. But what are the mustache tags doing for us in terms of our templating? What happens when we use double mustache tags here?
Goes into our dictionary or accessing our dictionary.
No, it's just creating some output in the template. So it's creating a replacement for us. Whatever goes inside those double mustache tags is actually going to be replaced into the HTML that gets given back to the browser. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, so again, the big difference here is that we have percent sign, which should create some kind of a control structure. So we can use that for conditional statements as well. So if we have an if situation, we only want to display something conditionally. It can also create a looping construct for us like this. And then the double mustache tags are just being used to actually output something to the HTML. All right. Now, what if I wanted to be able to add a new user to my application? How might I do that? What would I want to put on my page for that? What do we typically use to interact with a website when we want to submit some information to that website? What's that? Form. Yeah, exactly. So let's create a form on the page. So say form, and then inside there, I'm just going to create a couple inputs. So we'll just say I'm going to use some shortcuts here. Input group. I'm going to call this first name. First name Down here, I'll put another input group. You guys won't be able to use this unless you create an HTML snippet, which I can certainly help you guys do later on if you wanted to do it. But if I want first name, last name, oops, last name, and then I also want email. So I'll change the type of this one to email. Call that email. And then down here, I'm just going to drop in a little button to submit. Okay. Now we have a couple things in our form that we would typically add. So we have this attribute action. Does anyone know what action means?
Type of form?
So like, are we posting or?
Boom. That's exactly it. So what this is doing is it's just determining when we submit the form, what type of a request is it going to create. Okay. So if I leave that blank, or if I don't put in an action attribute at all, what kind of request do you think that will make?
What was the question?
It won't. It's not going to make one period. So when I submit the form, if I leave off this action attribute completely, what kind of request will that make to my web application? No, by default it is not post. It would be a get request. Yeah, so by default, if I leave this off, it's going to become a get request, which means that all of the things that are entered inside the form are going to appear in the address bar of our internet browser. What if I was submitting something like a password? Would we want to be doing a get request on that? No. Because all of that stuff that I insert in the form when I actually submit it is going to be visible in the address bar there. All right. So let's change that because we're pretending like we're creating a new user. So let's just say the action is going to be post. Whoops. This is not the action. The action is actually where this is going. You guys didn't catch me on that. The method is post. Sorry about that. Okay. What does the action do, though? This is important too. So these two pieces are gonna determine how our form gets handled. So this is the type of request that it's gonna make when I submit the form.
Gets or posts, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We could. Jesus, my casing's messed up. Sorry. All right, so we can either do get or post, and then here our action is going to determine what? Where it goes, exactly.
Is that when you like link it?
So we're gonna create an actual URL that will handle this form submission. Okay, and then so you're going to want to pick something that actually makes sense to you, because you're going to need to reference it on the back end inside of our server.py. Okay? So let's just say action is going to be, I'm going to go /users because I'm creating a new user. And then inside my server.py, well, let's just render the page real quick and see what happens. So if I go like this and I insert my information, and I submit that, what happens here? Not found, yeah, because it actually routed me up there. You guys can maybe see that, but we went to /users, right? Do I have a route set up for that yet? No, I don't. So what I want to do is actually create a route in our server.py that will be able to handle this. And if I go up here, create a new route, app.route, and then this time my route is going to be /users. And then I'll create a new function to handle that specific route. So we'll just call it create user. Okay. And then inside there, what we want to do is we want to actually just print out what was the information that came in through the form submission. All right. How do we get access to that? We use something called the request object. So let's say we'll go print request dot post.
So would you all these within the Flask or using Flask?
Correct. Yeah, this is all.
You could do the same thing without the Flask, right? Just like the HTML and the Python on its own without having Flask. Like the get, like the retrieval, right? Like the get function.
Yeah, obviously, like we could theoretically write all of the Flask code that would be handling these requests in this way, or give ourselves some type of interface that we want to work with. So how do we handle specific
What does
routes?
Flask actually do?
It's giving us the ability to handle specific routes and then do something with those routes. So from Flask, we're also importing render template, right? We didn't have to write that code to actually take our HTML and then inject some content into it. We're going to import some other things from Flask too that we'll see in a minute, which again, we don't need to write that code. That's already in Flask itself. All right, so it makes our jobs as developers a lot easier. Okay, so we want to print this request.form, and then what we also want to do is just redirect back to our main index page. Okay, so I'll say something like return redirect, and then if I go / should redirect me back back to that index page. What kind of problem do we have here, guys? Same as earlier, right? So if I got that red squiggly, it's telling me here, hey, this thing is not defined, undefined variable. And then here, same thing with redirect, right? Where do you think I'm going to get those things from? From Flask, right? So again, this is making our jobs easier. We don't have to write those things. Let's grab them. So we'll grab request, we'll grab redirect. Okay. And let's let's try to run this. So basically what we're doing is we're printing request.form, and that should be all of the information that came in through our form submission, right? Then we're just going to send ourselves right back to the index page. Okay, any questions about this? So let's go back to localhost 3000. Okay.
So we don't have a server yet, right?
Yeah, we do.
That's the 3000.
Yeah, exactly. So it's at port 3000 right now. However, let's backtrack real quick. So notice how we got a method not allowed. So what does that mean? What method did we use on our form? Post. Yeah, we're using post, right? But Flask doesn't know that. So inside Flask, if I just say @app.route and I just put some route in there, it's going to think that automatically I'm using, this is going to be a GET request. It's not though, so I need to actually tell Flask what methods I'm accepting here. So I'm going to put in here that this particular route is going to accept a list of methods, and the method that I'm sending to it is going to be a post method. Okay, so it's very important that you guys actually supply a list when you're accepting post requests, because otherwise it's going to complain about this. It's going to say methods that you supplied, it's going to say something like it's not iterable. Okay, and you guys are going to be looking at that error going, iterable. So it needs to be an actual list. Okay, but that list can have just one thing in it. So I can just accept post requests at this.
We just have one, or does it like vary?
Probably in all the cases that you guys are going to be working with, it'll just be one. It'll just be a post request. Because if I accepted both a post and a GET request to that URL, I would then have to sort of figure out how to handle it inside the function, right? I really only want to have one function that's doing one thing. So in this case, I'm just registering users at this route. All right. Okay, so let's try that again. I'll see if I can just. All right. So notice how I was able to just refresh and actually get back to the index. What brought me back to the index? You guys remember? What happened after line 7? I returned a redirect. So I redirected myself back to the index page. But if you guys can see in here, we have something that was printed out, immutable multi-dict, and then you can see I've got my first name in there, last name was there, and then my email is there. Okay? So how would I access specific attributes of that? So this is essentially a dictionary, right? Say it again. Well, I can't hear you. Can I loop through it? Yeah, I could definitely loop through it. Or what if I just wanted the first name property or attribute? I could just go first name, right? Like that. Okay, so let's do that. I'll submit it again. I'm not even going to fill out the rest of the stuff. And here we'll see that we just printed out the first name. Okay. I think that's pretty much all we needed to cover today. Let me just double check. See if we got through everything. Yeah, so one thing on when we were looping through some users in the template, later on, and especially in Django, how would we typically get a list of users? Would we just sort of hard code a list and then pass those along to our template? Or might there be another way to get them? From a database, right? Yeah, exactly. And if you guys remember, that might look something like, I don't know why I'm doing this inside of a terminal, but we would type up, we would have something like select all from users, right? That's how we would do something to interact with our database to go get our list of users before we pass it along to the template. Now in this case we were just hard coding something, but that's not obviously not how you do it in a real application, and we'll get there. We'll get to the point where we're actually grabbing data from a data source.
The MySQL letter, or is it going to be linked to the Flask, like with like this next day or two, or is it going to be like next week when we start like integrating SQL too?
Well, the interesting thing is you guys are kind of like a pilot program because before we had the Flask and MySQL integration as a standard part of the curriculum. Now it's turned into an optional part. So rather than connecting those two things, we're trying to encourage you guys to get to the Django portion of the curriculum because we'd like you to actually take the exam in Django. So we'll see how that goes. Django has something a little bit different that allows us to get access to our data. We don't have to actually write SQL queries like what I was just showing you there. Okay.
Is that more efficient? Like, what's the objective with doing it that way?
Yeah, what if you wanna integrate it, like do we still have like the option of Django?
Do you still have the option of Django? Is that what you said?
Well, because you said Django is to access like data and stuff, right? And then MySQL is the same thing.
No. They're totally different things. So Django is sort of going, when we get to the Django portion of the curriculum, it's essentially going to replace Flask. So right now we're writing a very lightweight kind of small server. Django is a bit more robust, more batteries included. So it's a server that has more features inside of it.
Are we going to be using SQL at all in more future other languages?
Yeah, you guys will be using SQL again in Java as well. So it won't like completely go away. I'm just letting you know. The actual part where you connect Flask with MySQL if you have time and you're ahead of schedule, then definitely do it. If not, then we're going to want you to jump into Django.
So like Flask is kind of just to get like our feedback for the actual like for Django.
Correct. Yep, exactly. So just a couple things here that I think maybe I didn't mention. How many requests are we making when we submit and add user requests? So when I submitted that form, how many requests happened there?
Just one.
Well, let's think about it. So there was the one request for the actual form submission, right? And then there was also another request because I sent myself to a different page. I went back to the index, right? Okay. So that's 2 right there. There's one other request that I actually meant to show you guys, and I'll show you real quick. If I want to actually put some kind of a static file to actually load up a static file on my template, I can do it using a static folder.
What's a static file?
Static file is something that does not change. Okay? So something like a CSS file or a JavaScript file, that's always going to be the same. So I can put that inside my static folder. So if I want to do,
So kind of like a template.
it's not really a template because again, a static file is not going to change at all. I'm not going to put more information inside of that file than was already there. I'm not going to substitute using like double mustache tags or something like that. So if I want my whole body to have a background, let's just say we want the background to be green, okay? And this isn't going to look great. It's not really supposed to. This is just to show us that we're actually loading up a file here. Okay, so inside my template, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little function that we have available to us. So this is how we link a style sheet, right? We say link rel equals style sheet, and then the href is the actual location of that style sheet. So I want to use my double mustache tags to do what again? What do these do for me? Anyone?
Something with a slash, right?
What?
Something with like a slash.
Something with a slash? What do you mean? No, I'm just asking, what do my double mustache tags do again? It's very important that you guys know what the point of the double mustache tags is.
Protect it from the cold.
Now you got me scratching my head. Woo! We're outputting something to the template. Okay, so this whatever is inside these double mustache tags will be replaced when we actually serve up this page. Okay?
What do you mean? What do you mean will be replaced?
What I mean is that when Flask generates this page for us, because we've told it, if we look here in our server.py, notice how down here I'm rendering a template, right? I'm rendering this template index.html. When we run this code, the rendering the template, Flask is also putting in dynamically any of the information that we're giving to it. Okay, so here I was saying I want to pass along a list of users to my template. So if I want to pass something along to the template and I want to actually show it in the template, what do I need to use? The double mustache tags. Exactly. So, but instead, right now we were just going to link a style sheet here. So I'm going to use this special function that we have. It's called URL4. And then we want to say static, whoops, I need to do it with single quotes here because we're inside double quotes. So the first argument is just going to be static. And then the second argument will be, we're going to say file name equals the name of the file. So the name of the file that I wanted to link, again, was just style.css. Now if I had style.css in some kind of subfolder, I would do it like this. I would say sub folder /style.css. Okay, does that make sense? But I don't right now, so I'm just going to do it like this. Okay, I'll save that, and then let's just let's refresh our page. There we go. Okay. So now, when I submit this form, let's ask ourselves how many requests are being made. This is the trick question. One. All right. Any other guesses?
4.
4. Okay, that's a good guess. 3. Ah, why 3? he's just yeah, lucky guesser. All right. What was that?
I was thinking 3 as well.
3.
So just what? Just submit, redirect.
Okay.
Trying to remember what the third one is.
Okay. So the redirect itself is not a new request, but when we land back on the index page, that's making a new request, right?
First name, last name, isn't that-
Well, those aren't all separate requests, though. Yeah. So, so here are the requests that are happening. So the form submission is one request. Then the next request is after we redirect, we hit this page, right? The third request is to get that style sheet. So notice here, if I were to actually go into my network tab, and let me just do it again. So I'm going to check this little preserve log box so that we can see what happens. So if I just put in my name, and then, oh goodness, where are all my requests?
Hey, Marty, what do you mean by redirect to them?
Hold on one second here. Okay. What do I mean by redirecting? So it means I want to send the user to a different route in my application. So what route were we receiving this form submission on?
What route?
Yeah. What route did I make to be able to handle a submission of that form? We'll look in server.py. So in server.py, I made this route up here, which accepts post requests /users, right? So what I mean is that this is the route that we've gotten to after we submit the form, but ultimately I actually want to redirect a person back to my index route so that I can just show them the page of the users that we have and the form that we had on there. Okay? Does redirecting make sense? It just means that we're going to a different location in our application. That's all.
So as the user, so like if I'm on a computer and I input my information and I hit submit, I hit submit. So then when I hit submit, it's gonna redirect me, or
Probably after it does its processing. So here, notice how we just printed out some little piece of information from that. What do you think we would normally do if we were actually adding users here?
we would just plug it into a database.
Right, we would actually want to insert that into our database. Okay. Now, why would we not want to actually render on this page? Does anybody know? Because obviously, I could return render template right here in my post request. Why might I not want to do that? Yeah. I'm kidding.
What do you mean by render? What do you mean by render?
What does render template mean? You tell me.
If you're rendering simple that is something you just basically like just making the template appear right.
Yeah, exactly. So we're assembling the HTML file that we already have, and then we're injecting any data into it that we wanted to pass along to it. So down below, when I was passing a list of users, that's what render template is doing, is it's assembling that HTML file and just replacing the double mustache tags with the information that I wanted replaced in there. Okay? Okay, so the reason, and I'm just going to kind of cut this off because we're running kind of long on time, but the reason why we don't want to actually render on a post request is because what if a person just reloads that page on the post request? Have you guys ever seen that thing where it'll say something like confirm form submission? You may duplicate your submission, right? Okay, so we don't want to do that. We don't want to potentially create two orders, or we don't want to create a user twice. And that's one way to actually prevent that, because once we've redirected them, they're no longer on that post route anymore. Okay, so they submit the form one time, we do the processing of that form, and then we send them back, to whatever page we want to send them to after. Any questions about that part? Why we redirect on a post? Okay, good. Any questions overall about what we did today? No? Thumbs on this? Let's see thumbs. Thoroughly sideways? Thoroughly sideways all around? Holy moly. I have to well, I hope I did a decent job of this explaining.
I
just
think
have
it's,
to
I
play
think,
with things.
I
I understand that. Yeah.
I think
Okay.
it's more that we're like, for me, I'm still like in my OOP mindset, so
Right.
it's like taking in something new before I like move forward with that. So, but
Understood.
like it was explained well.
Okay. And you can see that we're not using huge bits of OOP here. I mean, we are bringing in the Flask class, and we're creating an instance of that class. And then, of course, when we did app.run, we're running a method off of our instance. But, aside from that, it's not like OOP heavy,
Yes.
right? Okay. Cool, guys. You are dismissed. I'll put this video up as soon as I can.